Awesome.
Elizabeth, hi. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you.
So excited. So, my listeners, anybody who is new to the Perinatal Podcast, this will be new information, but those of you who've been around for a while, they know like I have a binge eating disorder. I was diagnosed with ADHD in fourth grade. And I have a nephew who is 10 and has autism, level one autism. And so I'm reading this book. It's actually over there. I usually have it right next to me, but I put it over there just now about like eating for autism, and it's all about neurodivergence in general. And I don't know, I'm just always interested in kind of the intersection of how our bodies all interact with everything. And so when I came across your information, I was like, let's have this conversation. That's a new one we haven't had yet.
Yeah, I can't wait to dig in.
Yeah. So how did you get into nutrition and wellness to begin with?
So it's a bit of a second or even a third, honestly, depending on how you slice it, career for me. But I probably about 20 years ago, my oldest daughter is 22. And I really was interested in nutrition, even though I was doing something completely unrelated at the time. And I think I felt like I was interested in it anyway. I have rheumatoid arthritis. I've had it since I was a senior in high school, and I really saw the benefit in my own life of focusing on nutrition and helping to manage
Mm,
my RA. And then
yes.
I think having children made me think, or not, it just made me realize this is really important thing to focus on. I want to set my own kids up well. And I eventually, after thinking about it for a long, long time, went back to school and got a master's degree in nutrition and became a dietitian. And I always wanted to work in health promotion. Honestly, really how we can use nutrition and our lifestyle behaviors to promote health and wellness. So I
Yeah.
think just kind of an intersection of a lot of things is sort of how I came to it.
No, and I love that too. The what you were just talking about with the RA and managing that, it made me somehow kind of a loose connection here if you'll roll with me, but it made me think of when Tom Brady was on a podcast and he was talking about some of the things he eats, and he talks about staying away from like bell peppers because
Uh-huh.
there's so much. And I'm like, it's a bell pepper. It's so healthy. What are you talking about? Why wouldn't you eat bell peppers? It's green or red and beautiful and colorful. And it's like
Yeah.
inflammation. And it's just, and I have a dietitian, which is what privilege. I have a dietitian that I see every week. We started about 3 weeks ago. It's been such a game changer for me.
Awesome.
I'm so grateful for that. And just some of the like, and I had this really bad perception because I graduated high school and undergrad in the aughts. So like classic Victoria's Secret era, classic Howard Stern telling Anna Nicole Smith she's too fat,
Yeah.
feeling fully
So
entitled to do
toxic.
so. Hate your body, hate your body. And so I was talking to my dietitian and was like, well, I'll give the kids like pineapple and stuff, but I try not to eat too much because it's got so much sugar, or like bananas, that's just a stick of sugar. And she's like, what? And she's like, but there's so much fiber in that, and that's so good for you. And of course, I'm not here to say like, yes, those of you who have diabetes needs and whatnot, do make sure that you keep these things in check. But it's really wild how much we don't learn about things, and the things that we feel are so super healthy, not to say that bell peppers aren't, or the things that we think are so unhealthy but are still natural because we just heard it somewhere. Or like, to be fair, I
Yeah.
do listen to a lot of like TV rewatching podcasts, and they're always talking about their bodies, and it's like craft services, and oh, you got to stay away from the grapes, it's sugar bombs, or don't eat a banana, that's a stick of sugar. So not for
Yeah.
nothing do I hear these things. But anyway, for all of that long ramble, when you were talking about RA, got me to that Tom Brady thought of like, man, there's so much that we don't know about food and how it plays with our body and how we fuel everything.
Well, and I think what gets lost in amidst all that noise, which, I would
Yes,
sort of call diet culture, all that, what you
yes,
were just
yes,
mentioning, grapes are sugar bombs and bananas have too much sugar and we can't eat this thing, we can't
yes,
eat that thing. And it's sort of one, it's just also negative, right? It's all about what not to do instead
yes,
of let's focus on the foods we can add to our plate that can really improve our health and well-being.
yes.
And there's just so much noise and fear mongering around it. And I think people lose sight of the fact that our relationship with food is really, really important. And it's like
Yes.
how we eat is just as important as what we eat.
Yes.
And nutrition is individualized. It's going to be different for everyone because we're all in a different body and we all have different genetics. We all have different lifestyle. And we all have different preferences and we all have different, needs and goals that we're working towards. And I think the nuance gets lost, unfortunately, in a lot of the conversation.
Mhm.
And even though I'll share that sort of what I'm doing as a dietitian is honestly entirely different than what I thought I would be doing when I kind of went back to school to become a dietitian. I really thought that I would be telling people what to eat. And so
Yes.
much of our education is focused on weight and BMI and all of that kind of stuff. And it's really not how I practice nutrition at all. I work at it
Mhm.
from a weight neutral perspective. And really, I
Yes.
help people with their relationship with food and their body. And I just think it's something that's really important and overlooked or
Yes.
minimized.
It's so interesting. And I think people, again, there's just it's such a hot button. There's such a,
Mhm.
I don't want to say polarizing because I don't even want to, I don't want to put the energy of one thing or the other in the universe,
Yeah.
but people have really strong opinions about
Yeah.
food, nourishment, diet culture, healthy at every size. I love that my dietitian uses as well the neutrality
Uh-huh.
piece. Because she even told me, she was like, because I had mentioned my goal weight, and she was like, I don't need to know your numbers, but you can certainly tell me them. That's not a focus of mine, but I'm not going to ignore them. Like being in that space of, you kind of lead it there, but just, and how long we've known, and please correct me if I'm misspeaking, but we've known that BMI is not an accurate representation and depiction of a person's health, and yet we keep using it. What is that?
I know it just won't die. I mean,
It just
yeah,
won't die.
there's so much wrong with it. I mean, there's so many things that it just doesn't take into account, just really physically. And I think weight and health aren't the same thing. And yet we talk about them in our culture as if they are.
Yes.
And it's harmful and it does a lot of harm for a lot of people. And I think the more we can get away from that, the better off we'll all be.
Yes.
And it's also, aside from all of the inherent problems with it, the BMI in its own, it
Mhm.
doesn't tell us anything about a person's lifestyle. And if we want to help someone get healthier or take care of their bodies better, instead of just focusing on a number, let's talk to people about what they're doing, what they're not doing, and share things that they can do. Part of the reason why I switched my focus as a dietitian when I first started for like a hot second, I worked in weight loss because I thought, all right, I'm a
Oh, sure.
dietitian. I want to go into private practice. That's just what you have to do. That's what people want. And I hated it. It was super inauthentic to me. I didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, and I also noticed that the few people that I was working with who wanted weight loss could be making great changes to what they were eating or how much they were moving or some of their other behaviors. And if the number didn't move quickly
Yes.
enough or the way they wanted it to, they would come back and say, Elizabeth, it's not working.
I'm
And
failing.
yeah, and I'm thinking,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, of course it's working. Like, let's rattle through all the changes that you're making and let's redefine how we assess what's working and what's not working. And if you
Yes.
only attach success to that number, uh, you know, it's not true that if everyone out there just eats less and moves more, they'll attain
Yes.
some mythical ideal weight number.
Yes.
Body diversity is real.
Yes.
And, you know, there's a lot that goes into a person's metabolic health and their weight. And that I just think that messaging does harm. And for
Mhm.
me, around the same time that I was doing that, my kids were also entering middle school and high school ages. And I started to see how many people in
Yes.
our orbit were
Yes.
struggling with eating disorders and disordered eating. And I put those two things together and I just looked at it and thought, I can't do this. Like, that's not how I want to go out and talk about nutrition and health. And I think it's doing harm and there's a different, better way to go about it.
Absolutely. I am deeply obsessed with the Olympics, deeply. I will watch every single sport. I don't want to even mention a sport because I don't want to pretend like one sport deserves more credence than I was like, I'll watch. No, not going to say it. I'll watch them all. I'm so into it. Like what passion and drive and like the backstories and all of
Yeah.
that. But it was really interesting. I think this was one of the first times that I mean, we could go on this could be a whole topic of the show just to talk about what happened in the Olympics. But like, I feel like talking about body diversity, and people
Mhm.
do feel so entitled to be able to comment on the rock star medalist women's rugby team members, and talk about their BMIs and whatever. And they're like, yeah, no, my BMI is air quotes obese, but look, I'm a machine, and this sort of stuff. And as much as people did still feel entitled to make comments on people's bodies, particularly women competitors, I felt like there was a lot of advocacy on the other side of like, look at what they're doing. They are
Yeah.
fueling their bodies. They are solid muscle. They are working the things that they need to do. I wish I could be more articulate in what I'm trying to say here, but like, it was really empowering for me to see that. And then I, in turn, felt more empowered when I would hear friends kind of mention something. I'd be like, I just don't want to talk about people's bodies. Like, I actually say that a lot now too, in general. And
Yeah.
again, I'm from the aughts, and so I think sometimes our knee-jerk reaction is to comment on other people's bodies, because that was our way of understanding what our worth was, is how
Yeah.
much our body fit this one thing. And
Yeah.
just to be able to be in a space to be like, I just don't want to talk about other people's bodies. Like,
Yeah. I think sadly it's a way that women bond a lot of times,
yes, the
particularly
mutual
like
enemy, or
yes.
we're better than they are, and so therefore we feel better. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so what I try to always help my clients understand is those conversations nobody leaves those conversations feeling good, right? All that hyper focus on how our bodies look. It doesn't matter if you're in a large body, a thin body, a small body.
Yes, yes.
It's pressure. It's pressure on everyone and it doesn't feel good. And it just adds to that potential body dissatisfaction and
Mhm.
body image issues. And also, I totally agree with you. I love the conversation. A lot of it made me sad, but there was also a lot of great conversation around the Olympics and body diversity. And Ilona Mayer's like an awesome,
Chills when
uh,
you said her name just now. I got actual chills.
yeah. I mean, her messaging is fantastic. And imagine if we all were, if we all got way more of that messaging every single day, just embracing and accepting our bodies and celebrating what they can do and minimizing what they look, it would be so much easier to just have a body.
I love that you just said have a body, because that's literally what was going to be my next point, was like, we just fight against this thing that we cart around our thoughts and feelings and expressions in. And what if we just were like, this is the body I have? And I do espouse, I always say, I'm always one movement. I call it exercise or workout, but like movement away from a better mood. If that
Yeah.
mood goes from a 4 to a 4.5, it's not a 10, but it's a 4.5, and that's better. Like, I really do believe in the power of movement and all of those things that
Yeah.
happen. And so, not to say like fully divorce yourself from health culture or whatever that looks like, but being really intentional about the self-talk that goes with it, and saying like, this is just my meat suit. Let me talk
Yeah.
about me. Let me talk about my thoughts, my passions, my experiences, like how cool it is that my base on the cycle, my flat road is like 12 points higher than it was when I first started after I had my second baby. And like, that's really
Yeah.
cool. Those kind of things that don't
Yeah.
have to be rooted in achievement, but just like, not for anything else, but just like, I feel myself getting stronger and healthier. And I'm not doing it because I want Victoria's Secret to approve me.
Right. Well, there's so many amazing reasons to move your body, and movement can be wonderful. And I love all sorts of different activities myself. I'm a pretty
Mm.
active person, but there's a big difference from feeling like, oh, I gotta go slog it out on the treadmill for 30 minutes because I have to burn so many calories so that I can,
Yes.
meet a certain body size versus wow, if I go for a walk at the end of the day, it actually like melts some of my stress away and it puts me in a better mood and like it feels good to use my body or it helps me sleep better at night. And what I see a lot of times is when people are only looking at either exercise or food, frankly,
Yes.
through the lens of the number on the scale, it's disempowering, right? It
Yes.
becomes this punitive, punishing thing that we have to do. And leads to kind of people falling into all or nothing behaviors or hating exercise or
Yes.
um, just your relationship with it matters, and the way you frame it matters to help you
Mhm.
engage in the things that can actually add to the quality of your life.
When you were saying that, that made me think of, and I apologize if I'm actually giving anybody's actual Peloton name. I'm just making them in my head, but I'm sure somebody owns it somewhere. But it does, like, I don't want us to not be able to joke about things. I don't want comedy to die. I think that we maybe swung the pendulum too far that way. But I
Yeah.
can't tell you how many, like, when you get hear these shout outs and it's like, run for wine and
Yeah.
I spin for burgers and I this for that and like, but first pizza or, and
Yeah.
I have a gym. I'm talking about myself here, team. I have a gym bag that says like workout now, pizza later, or after this, we're getting pizza, something like that.
Yeah.
So I don't think let's shut it all down, but there is a part of me that wants that I want to be like, okay, but can we talk about that a little more? Yes,
Well, yeah,
and are
because
you only doing this so that you can have a cheeseburger, or you're just saying like both of those things in combination, and I
mhm.
love that you mentioned the all or nothing thinking. And this is something that I do talk about a lot as well, about like, I even just this morning was talking to my girlfriends on a mama's thread that we have. And like, I sent them this 10-minute core workout. And I was like, I only had 10 minutes on Friday. And I was so pumped because this was a good workout that I like felt for the next couple of days. And I felt like it was making me stronger. And yeah, ideally, I'd love to be able to work out for 30 or 45 minutes a day. And I think sometimes we get into that habit of like the ADHD, perfectionism, all of that stuff that we have. It's either all or nothing thinking. And if we can't do it 45 minutes full out, make your personal best every single time, then well, then it's just not worth it. And it's like, do a 10-minute stretch, burn 7 calories. Did you move your body though? Were you doing something else? Like, I just
Yeah.
hope that we're empowering people to understand that it doesn't have to be, I mean, I just talked about the Olympics, so fair enough. It doesn't have to be an Olympic gold medal
Yeah.
standard achievement. It's just the movement and going back to the RA and the inflammation and the peppers and how those things are interconnected. Like your mood is so influenced by movement and getting up and doing things. And again, it's not running a marathon, it's literally stretching or going for a
Right.
walk.
Yeah, that it's so common for me to hear people say, well, it doesn't count if it's not a certain intensity, if it's not a certain number of
Yeah.
calories, if it's not a certain length of
Yeah.
time, it doesn't count. It's like, oh
Yes.
my gosh, of course it counts. Well, first of all, did you enjoy it? It counted. And also,
Most importantly, I
anytime you're
think, did
moving
you
your
enjoy it?
body, yeah, anytime you're moving your body, it's a win, right? We can reframe that for people. And I think to go
Yes.
back to what you were saying a second ago about the sort of like lighthearted and the comedy of runs for wine or whatever it is. I think it's like I struggle with that because I agree with you. Like, of course, we want to have laughter in our world, but the messaging there is really subtle. The idea that we have to
Yeah.
earn our food through
Yeah.
exercise or we have to burn it off through exercise. When
Yes.
in reality, our bodies need adequate, enjoyable nourishment every single day, whether we're moving or not.
Yeah.
And it's subtle, but it's such an it's like a great example of how sneaky diet culture thinking is, that it's like it's really is woven into the fabric of our lives in ways that just seems lighthearted or normal or what you hear. But if you sit back and think about it, it's actually it can be harmful messaging for a lot of people.
Yes, and for those of us with children, I'm sitting here, and if I may, we just met Elizabeth. Like I'm sitting here, and I'm feeling so spoiled by the opportunity that like I just watched these Olympic games where people are saying like, stop talking about women's bodies, they could kick your ass. Like,
Yeah.
pardon my language, but like my kids are 3 and 5, and so I feel so empowered to be like, we're not talking about people's bodies, we're not doing it. And you're saying that your oldest is 22, and like hopefully things were better then than they were for me at that age, and so on and so forth. But like I just, as Pollyanna as it may feel about like bullying and all of these things, I do really hope that like each generation continues to stand in their truth of this is the actual scientific evidence of what bodies need to do versus keep mentioning Victoria's Secret. I need to pick on somebody else, but like, are you ready to walk in a fashion show? And even then, like the fashion industry is starting to have, like my son and I are obsessed with Project Runway, and
Mhm.
they did used to size 0, like
Mhm.
Tyra, Next Top Supermodel or whatever it was called. And like, there was a chick who was a size 4 and she
Yeah.
was plus size. And they were like, well, do you have any plan to lose any weight? I mean, you're real heavy for the industry. And this was in like, I don't know, 2008 or something. I don't know. And I'm just so grateful that we do continue to move past that. But also for those of us in our age group that we think, you know, hello for Pinot is cute and funny, but the messaging like to others, but also to ourselves, it's still internalizing that.
Yeah. And also, I think just being aware, especially given the audience of your podcast, of the way we talk about it matters. Like our kids pick up on that,
Yeah.
and it can be totally unintentional and totally subtle, but
Yes.
those messages seep in and get woven into their understanding of food and body. And, I always, well, yeah, I just think it's important to know that and
Yeah.
be able to look for it.
And I also have my own therapist, and we talk about these things intentionally, like the anxiety. Like even when you started talking about this earlier, I started to feel anxious, thinking,
Oh,
"What am I?" No, it's fine. We're good. I'm very well centered right now. But we'll also process that with my therapist and be like, I just anytime somebody mentions anything about parenting, that I have kind of a reaction of like, okay, but am I being really intentional about that? Am I making sure that because again, I do have a binge eating disorder. Have had historically a terrible relationship with food. For
yeah,
me, that was my favorite coping skill is a bacon cheeseburger. Any one of my clients can tell you that I've said that because I want them to understand like there's a range of coping skills and some of them are
yeah,
adaptive, some of them are less adaptive. And a cheeseburger is not one of the worst ones that you could do, but it can't be the one that I do every time and on
right.
and on and on. And so for me, trying to be intentional about like, I'm in the worst mood ever. Let me go pound a bag of Doritos. Like, I want to make sure that my kids aren't seeing me do that and associating. And then also on the other side of that, too, like the reward behavior. Like,
Mhm.
oh, you did this thing. And so you get a cookie. But I also want to hold space that sometimes people need that for toilet training or like, I am not an expert on all of this, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of it swirling around. And that's why I love having these conversations on this show because a lot of parents feel the same way I do of like,
Yeah. Well, because again, like it's just another aspect of pressure, right? I mean, there's
yes,
so much pressure on parents anyway. And it's
yeah,
just another area where it comes up. And I think nobody's going to do it perfectly. And also, you can do the very best that you can in your own home, but we still live in a diet culture and they're going to get it elsewhere as well. But hopefully, if anyone out there with children, like just an invitation to learn about how can you grow your kids with food and body confidence and like what can you do to promote it?
mhm,
And
yeah.
that's really
Well,
all you can do,
and
you
while
know?
you were saying that, I was thinking as well about like the self-awareness piece. That for me is the biggest thing. Is I'm
Mhm.
worried that I'm doing something that I'm not aware of that my children are watching and I never have the opportunity. Because people who've listened to me here before and my clients, everyone knows I love an opportunity to apologize to my kids. I don't love the fact that I need to because that means I did something and
Yeah.
not within my core parenting values. Uh,
Yes.
but I love for them to see that I'm not perfect because I don't want them to aspire to perfection. So
Yeah.
that's not the problem. If I say something and I can catch it and say like, oh, that's not the best
Yeah.
way to do that. Here's how I think I might have done that differently next time. But my biggest fear is that I'm doing something that I'm not aware of that
Mhm.
they're seeing, that they're
Yeah.
internalizing. And that's why, again, that's why I espouse therapy. That's why I love to listen to other people's shows similar to
Yeah.
this, so that we're all thinking it's wild the things that we don't know that we don't know.
Yeah, and you only know them when you know them. So I do a lot of workshops kind of locally and virtually around growing kids with food and body confidence. And I'm very open and honest in starting them out with most everything that I'm going to teach in those workshops. I did completely wrong as a parent.
Mhm.
I made practically every mistake in the book. I was very interested in nutrition. I thought it was really all about what they eat. I thought there was this one perfect way of eating and that I had this opportunity to like, or not impose it, but to like teach it to these blank canvases, right? And so I just as an example, like sugar was pretty restricted in my house. I mean, it's not that my kids didn't have any access to it, but I definitely limited it and it made it like a thing um in because of what I thought I was supposed to do. And now if my kids were smaller, I would do it entirely differently than I did back then. But the beautiful thing about it is I said a minute ago, when I started learning about intuitive eating and people's relationship with food and the way that I now practice nutrition. My kids were in middle school and high school, and I, at that time, started shifting lots of the ways that we talked about and presented food and sort of our approach to it. And kids are really resilient. So
Yes.
they've learned that along with me. And I think the beautiful thing is like, it's never too late to change how you do it. And when you learn something, and there's, even if it's just one tiny thing, if there's like another way of doing it that may be more helpful, you can shift it. And even, you know, in my case, my kids were older, but have open conversations of, you know what, I think I got a few things wrong in how we thought about nutrition and like how I presented food to you. And I'm sorry. And I learned something different, and like, we're going to change. And they
Yes.
were super receptive. And so hopefully for anyone out there, that takes some of the pressure off as well of, you know, where you only know what you know when you know it. And when you know different, you can do different if it feels like the right thing for you.
Absolutely. And I do love that. That's a big thing for all of us, is like not aspiring to perfection, trying to find, like, perfection isn't real, but progress is. Are we trying to learn more? Obviously, if you're listening to this show, it's because you want to know more about neurodiversity and eating and parenting in general. You're here and you're still here listening, and us giving each other permission to give ourselves grace. It's so much easier if you and I are having this conversation, if you were talking about a friend, for me to be like, oh my gosh, of course you should, whatever, it's totally fine, you've got this, of course, da, da, da. But for me, it's like, oh, I did it wrong and failed and the world is ending and how dare I? And it's so hard for us to give ourselves grace, but we are so much more willing to give it to other people.
Right. Yeah. And the fact that you're worried about it, frankly, just shows what caring and loving and like diligent parent you are, right?
I say that so much. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you're asking the question, and not to point fingers and be like, well, this is a sign of a bad parent. But like, that I think is the problem, is when you've got somebody who's like, nope, I've got it all taken care of, I'm all sorted. And it's like, that is where we do run into some problems with many different things, not even just intuitive eating, but just in general. And so that's my biggest call out to parents, is just like, are you asking? Are you trying? Are you looking? Are you willing to show your children that you're asking and trying and working? That again, and I think that does so much for children's mental health. Again, I'm going to just keep repeating it, of like, then they don't feel like they have to have it all down. I talk to so many of my clients who are in so many various aspects of school, career, whatever. Like, even I have a client, I can't obviously give too much information, HIPAA, but like, is a student and so worried about being right. I'm like, this is your internship. You're not supposed to know most of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's such a high jump bar, such a pole vault moment for them to be able to get over that idea of like, it's okay to not know. It's not okay to go in and suck and be like, I don't know, whatever. But you're there to learn and grow and ask questions and make mistakes and then grow from that. But man, we just struggle with the idea of like having to start out as a perfectionist, or not a perfectionist, but start out as an expert.
Yeah. Yeah. And also, like, hopefully we'll continue to grow and learn throughout our entire lives, right? I think there's can be so much pressure put around that, specifically that college, you know, having kids who are just going to college, of like having to, you know, have their major and have it figured out and go to the perfect college and, you know, do the things. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, it's going to be okay.
It is really wild the way that we do. I mean, I don't have a solution otherwise. Like, maybe all 18-year-olds should go into the workforce for 5 years, and then at 23, 24, 25, that's when you go to college. And maybe we make that the more normal, standardized way of doing things. Somebody try to find a way to fund that. I don't know, but it's so much. We ask 16 and 17-year-olds to be so confident and know exactly what it is they want to do for a job. And I'm always espousing that virtue as well, because I mean, I changed my major, y'all, I kid you not, 7 times at Purdue. Still graduated on time at 21, took some summer school to get
impressive
accomplished. That was another thing for me. I needed to graduate in 4 years. Like, I had to, like, that was the thing. Like, my parents were paying for my undergrad, and actually they just paid it off yesterday, which is really exciting for me.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah. I feel like we need to like ring a bell or something on their back.
Literally, I'm like, it's officially mine. I don't even know where it is now. It's somewhere. Oh, it's right there. Anyway, we moved not too long ago. I haven't put my certificates and stuff up, but like that sort of energy of asking us to just know everything all the time. And as much as I don't want people to go and not utilize their time in college appropriately or and what is appropriate, but like being allowed to shift and change or being allowed to be in the space of one day at a time. I mean, that tenet holds up so well in AA and recovery for a reason. If you think about being sober for the rest of your life, it feels overwhelming and impossible. So
Yeah.
why even try? If
Mm-hmm.
you think that you have to pick the thing that you're going to do for the rest of your life at 16 or
Yeah.
17, that can feel so overwhelming. But hey, this is the thing that you do right now. And then maybe
Right.
when you get a job there, you have some entrepreneurial spirit and you learn a new craft within the industry, or you go get a master's degree or another thing, which all of that costs money in the United States. So what privilege, but like being willing to roll with things and not force ourselves into that one thing, which I'm going somewhere with this of like the idea of like, you have a shirt that says like, I eat keto, I eat
Uh-huh.
what, and they're all like lined out, and then it says I eat.
Yeah.
And it's like we feel the need to like have a label and put ourselves in these boxes and like do these certain things. And yeah, it's just like just have bodies and we all
Yeah.
embrace
Let's
a
just
little.
be in our bodies. Yeah. And do our best to treat them well, right?
Uh,
Whatever that means to us, it's going to mean something a little bit different to everybody.
yeah.
And also just allow, there's seasons to life. Sometimes you're in a season where maybe that's not your primary focus. And can we not shame people for that, but just allow that they're probably doing what they need to do for themselves as a whole?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, and I
and-
really like the idea too, where you were talking about diet culture being the problem and talking about it being the ultimate form of gaslighting
Mhm.
and like the promotion of disordered eating habits and like
Yeah.
the standards of all of that. Like, I just thought that that was really powerful, a way of looking at it as gaslighting.
Yeah, it is gaslighting. It's yeah, so I mean, unfortunately, disordered eating is so normalized in our culture that it isn't even really recognized as such a lot of the times, or it's praised. People
It's
get a lot
praise.
of praise and positive feedback for things that actually may be disordered eating, and you may see someone doing something that fits the standard definition we're given of what is healthy, but you have no idea how that person is feeling, what they're doing when you're not seeing them, what impact trying to do that is having on their mental or emotional health or their physical health. And yeah, I think the more we can expand the definition of what is healthy and the
Yeah.
more we can, I like to frame it for my clients as whole health, right? If you are eating in if like the stress or the overwhelm or the guilt of trying to eat a certain way is causing you detracting from your mental and emotional health, well, then it's not all that healthy, right? We want to look at whole health, physical, mental, and emotional health. And I always like to picture a Venn diagram. The place where all those overlap, that's the healthiest way of eating for you as an individual. And that's going to be different.
And individualized, yes. And
Mhm.
individualized. And not even with you and your partner or your kid, like everything is going to be different. And
Mhm.
allowing yourself that space to take up that space, to say, like, this
Yeah.
is what I need for me. And I actually do again, sorry, I keep talking about like ages and whatever, but like there's so many people that I see in the Gen Z, the young, typically ladies, but everybody who are wearing the crop tops and the short shorts and this and that and this and that, and people feel entitled to talk about it. And my response immediately has always been, and still is, especially again in light of all of the more conversations we're having, like what what that must feel like to
Yeah.
have. Please correct me. I'm going to use words and I'm not sure if they're correct words, but like
Okay.
rolls and lumps. We
Uh-huh.
don't say that, but like stuff
Sure,
sticking
as
in
long I
weird
mean, if
places.
you talk about them neutrally, that there's nothing wrong with having rolls and lumps,
Okay.
then
I don't want
yeah,
to. I don't
bodies
want to
have
use
rolls and
offensive.
lumps.
Yeah, I don't want to use offensive language, and I'm saying it in the most supportive. Like you have rolls and lumps in these places, and it is just out. And I'm like, and you're hurting nobody. And I just have to feel like that is such a mentally healthy space to be in, to wake up and or to go shopping and put on an outfit and not cry, or like be
Yeah.
out in the world and just not care what other people think about your body. And I get so energized. I was in Chicago last year to speak on a panel about mental health, and it was Lollapalooza. And so you can imagine the outfits I was getting to see. And I was just like, You get it, team. You all just get out and get it. Like,
Yeah.
we would never, like, never in some of these things. And so
Yeah.
it is energizing. And I'm excited for our generation then to start owning that language of, we're not talking about other people's bodies. Let them live their lives. It's bothering me in no way.
Yeah.
How about
Yeah.
that?
Nobody really ever needs to comment on someone else's body ever. It's just not helpful. It doesn't,
Yeah.
I have so many clients, even perhaps they're losing weight and people
Mhm.
are commenting and praising them, and it brings up a lot of strong emotions. And
Yeah.
also, if you just see someone out in the world, um, it may feel like a compliment to compliment someone's weight loss, but you have no idea what is going on behind the scenes. And also, it just highlights to the person that you're still focused on what their body looks like. So if we
That's what
could
they bring to
not,
the table first. I need to talk
yeah,
about how you look and what I think about your body. And then maybe
yeah.
talk about you as a person, but really want to talk about your body.
Yeah, and so the more we can not do that, I think the better off everybody will be. We just don't need to comment on it. And I think just to like put a spotlight on what you were saying about the rolls and the lumps, like let's normalize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, bodies have fat and bodies have rolls and bodies have lumps and they have dimples and they have stretch marks and they have these things that are just normal. And the
Yes.
more we can talk about them like they're normal and take away any meaning from
Yes.
that,
Yes.
then we all benefit from that.
Yes. Because bodies, like you said, because bodies have, and I like this too. Somebody said this like a decade ago when I was in grad school or something. They're like, you're not fat, you have fat. Like your body isn't fingernails, you have fingernails. Like,
Yeah.
right? It's the
Yeah.
same thing that we talk about, like you're not bipolar, you have bipolar. You're not
Yeah.
OCD, you have OCD, which we also bastardized the definition and the diagnostic criteria of OCD too much, and bipolar, but that's another story for another podcast. But I just love the idea of like you were saying, we get together and we talk about other people and it makes us feel better kind of in the moment, but we don't leave any better as humans, and whether or not we realize it, we're actually not getting better. So if we stop talking about other people, maybe we can stop. If we're willing to give other people more grace, maybe we can start giving ourselves that grace too, and start thinking, I'm nourishing my body, I'm fueling my body, I'm moving my body. I am not a dietitian, but like throwing away the scale, or I'm only looking at the scale in a very appropriate way because those numbers aren't a
Mhm.
reflection of the work that I'm putting in.
Right. Yeah. I love everything about what you just said. I think it's, are you taking care of your body in the way that you want?
Mm-hmm.
And irrespective of what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because your body is how you get through life. We can't get through life without it. And so often we talk about it as if it's like something different, right? There's mind or there's body, but actually it's all of us. And you can't be here without your body. So let's stop fighting our bodies and learn to just embody them and partner with them and respect them and take care of them the best way that we can. And that'll look different from day to day and from person to person.
Absolutely. I remember, and I am not espousing, I know people who listen, very lucky, have a lot of listeners in a lot of countries, and they're like, what are these pharmaceutical ads of which you speak? It's a wild thing here in the United States. We're like, talk to your doctor about getting this shot, that why your doctor wasn't prescribing it to you to begin with if you needed it, I don't know. But I do remember a commercial, and I apologize, I'm missing the era. Was it in the 90s when I was in elementary school, or in the aughts? I can't remember, but they had these people. Like, I remember one specifically, it was a woman who was probably like in her 50s or 60s, and she was svelte, and she was in a full wetsuit and a surfboard. And it's like, gets up at 5 every morning and works out and eats a clean diet and does something else. And then she's like walking like slow motion or whatever, but then she trips, and they're like, but her cholesterol is 275. And it's like, for me, I'm not espousing the virtue of that commercial or anything, but that was really, I remember a pivotal moment for me being like, oh, so you're saying that it doesn't matter necessarily what you look like or are doing, but like your cholesterol can still suck, or like other things can be going on. And so there's more to it than just external health as a measure of whether or not you're healthy.
Yeah.
And I think that that is the thing. Again, mind your business is probably the key theme of this episode today, but like understanding that if somebody else has more lumps and bumps and cellulite than you do, it's not a competition, first of all, but like they might have a very healthy A1C and a very healthy, all of their levels of
Yeah.
cholesterol, healthy this, and they're going to live to be 107 driving themselves around town. and they're not going to ever have fit into a size 0. And
Yeah, it's such an important message. Health doesn't have a look. You cannot tell someone's health by looking at them. And I don't know of a single disease that only impacts people in a certain body size, right? You can have high cholesterol or high blood sugar or cancer or heart disease or any of the things in a smaller body or in a larger body, but there's so little emphasis on that, right? There's so much weight, stigma, and phobia that goes into, people thinking that they have the right or the ability to tell if someone's healthy by looking at them or not. And you can't. Healthy bodies come in all shapes and sizes, and so do unhealthy ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, when you were saying that, that commercial came back to me, and it's like, oh yeah, that was a really just like descriptive way to describe for me to see that visually, like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
it's like one thing or the other, and we just need to stop that. And then for us individually looking at our own self, making sure, like, what are your suggestions on that, actually? Because I do listen to a ton of podcasts, but somebody was talking about like a Horvath scale where you get like your blood drawn, and it tells you what your metabolic age is versus your actual age. And then there are other things that can tell you, like, more so than just your annual physical. Do you have any suggestion? Which of course, we get your PCP, everyone establish care with a primary provider, get your annual physical, check, dentist, all that. But is there anything else that you suggest and encourage for people to make sure, like, we're hitting other benchmarks that are going to help us with our longevity and our health and all of that?
So I would go, of course, like check your lab markers, right? See if there's anything that comes up there, red flags, but also I would go to your behaviors, right? Like, are you eating a lot of plant foods? Are you moving your body regularly? Do you have and use stress management tools? Do you get, adequate sleep every night? How do you talk to yourself? How is your relationship with food or your body or movement? I would really broaden it out and look, are you tending to your mental health? Like, I think putting the emphasis on behaviors is probably more important, more where I would steer people to, because those are the things that you can influence and have control over. We don't necessarily always have control over the outcome, but we have control over what we do. And but in terms of, like, is there a magic thing I would look at? Or not magic, I don't mean to minimize what you said, but like
specific benchmark that, like,
yeah,
this
is there like
is
one snapshot? Not for me, no, because I think health is multidimensional.
It is, yeah. Again, I just keep coming back to when you were talking about the things that you were eating to fuel your body when you found out that you had RA. And
Yeah.
there are so many things that people just don't understand the interconnectivity. Like, I have bursitis in my shoulder, which I know if you're not watching, it's like, but like right just to the right of my spine. And I went and got a massage once, and the woman was massaging my armpit. And I was like, oh my gosh, why can I feel that so well where that is? And she was like, because this, and I don't know, y'all, I don't know the words. I don't know the words. I didn't take anatomy and physiology. I apologize. Those of you out here, you can put in the comments what this is. She's like, well, this thing here is attached to your bursa sac there.
Yeah.
You apply pressure here, like in my armpit. What? So just a really radical example of an idea. Or again, I go back to my bell peppers, which are one of my favorite vegetables, and I could honestly go a whole month without eating anything of the earth. I do like broccoli, so fine, but I could go that long. So for me, when he was like, well, I got to watch out for the inflammation, I'm like, well, good news for me is that inflammation isn't a problem, so I don't need to cut out bell peppers, but I do want to be more aware of the things that go with some of those things. So if I am recognizing, like, it's harder to get my ring off or whatever is going on in this cycle or whatever's happening, to do some more Googling and digging, to hire professionals like you who can walk us through these things, who can tell us that it's okay to eat a banana.
And a bell pepper. One thing that I'm thinking as you're talking is, I think also what gets lost in the conversation about nutrition is people want to reduce it to like one specific food, right?
Sure.
And as a dietitian, I can tell you my goal is to keep your diet as inclusive as possible, as varied as possible, because that's how you meet your nutrient needs.
Yes.
And I'm way more concerned about how you eat over the course of weeks and months than I am what's on your plate at lunch today.
Yes.
Or what you have for a snack after dinner tonight.
Yes.
And so like, it just, as you were talking about the bell peppers, I mean, there's I have RA, like I generally follow an anti-inflammatory eating pattern, but I don't cut out really any specific foods from my diet. I look at the overall big picture of my diet and my overall like stress levels, my overall picture. And so I guess that's one message that I would love to share with your audience is it's the pattern of your eating. Like when you hear people out there talking about this specific food, whether it's the food not to eat or the superfood, it's losing sight of the big picture. Like nutrition science, frankly, isn't that sophisticated yet to be able to drill down. We need to like zoom out, not drill down for the most people most of the time.
Yes.
Now, sure, somebody may have a specific medical condition, and then that's a different scenario. Like I'm not trying to minimize or take away from that, but most of the people, most of the time, let's look at what and how you're eating overall versus what time do you have breakfast, or do you eat after 6 o'clock, or are you only eating these foods?
Right.
It's like we can take so much stress off of how we eat, and we can make nourishing your body enjoyable and frankly pretty simple. It doesn't have to be so complicated. And I think when it gets complicated is when people just give up, tune out, get frustrated, think they can't do it.
Yes.
And it's really not helping most of the people.
Well, that comes back to that all or nothing then, right?
Yeah.
So I've made this routine or this whatever thing that this diet so rigid and so specific and so exclusive, it feels unmanageable, especially long term. And if I can't do it perfectly, then I'm just not going to do. So we come back to the same thing of like, no, do you have 10 minutes? Go do a core workout or take a walk around the walk. Of course, it's going to be 108 degrees here in Texas today. So
oh gosh.
I know it's been a whole journey, but coming from Kansas especially. But yeah, so it's just right, like how we get ourselves out of that. And I love that vision, that visualization of like, we're not trying to decrease what you can eat. We're trying to expand. We're trying to look further into the picture of what we can do, because it's like you were talking about the pattern. I want to hold the space for like, it's one day at a time though, of like, what are we going to do right now? And what are we going to do here? And how do we build that long-term pattern of I'm doing it, I'm doing that, I'm doing this. And then looking back and being like, hey.
Yeah. And I think flexibility is key to that, right? The best diet for you is the one that you can stick with over the long term. The one that allows you to go out to restaurants and order and not be stressed about it and still generally choose foods that feel good in your body. The one that you can go on vacation and still generally eat that way. Is it going to look a little different? Yeah, sure, you're on vacation, but it doesn't have to be so drastically different than how you normally eat that you come back feeling like crap and thinking that you have to, buckle down and choose another diet. And so I think flexibility is key, and also allowing for healthy eating to be pleasurable. It should be enjoyable. We're allowed to enjoy our food. That is health promoting too. And I think it's another message that just gets so neglected out in the world. You don't hear people talking about, are you enjoying your food in diet culture, right? It's just this punitive, punishing, reductionist, like fear mongering, a perfectionist, idealistic, all the things. And so it can be so much more simple and more enjoyable and more balanced and inclusive.
Yes.
And probably serves a whole lot more people.
Yeah. I was just honestly, when you were mentioning that, a couple of things, like with the vacation, especially, that has always been like, no matter how restrictive or whatever I was trying to do it before it, vacation for me historically had been like, exercise box of extra toasted Cheez-Its and a big old bag of Funyuns and like And it's like, not to say that you can't have that, but like the mentality of like the pedal for Pinot again, like I'm on vacation and therefore I must be gluttonous to be able to step that back and like, of course, please go and enjoy yourself a nice deep fried battered piece of grouper, which I'm so sorry to those of you who are Fisher people and you're like, don't deep fry and batter my fish, but anyway, it's delicious. Like, of course, being able to enjoy, but like that pendulum for me it is just like wheels off, let's go. And getting out of that mentality can be so helpful as well, of like, no, we're just pedaling. And if you have some Pinot later, that's cool.
Yeah. It's really about finding, I tend to work with people who really fall into those all or nothing patterns. And like my goal is to help people find the happy, healthy middle.
Yeah. I love that.
It's pretty nice in the middle. It's
Yeah.
also a lot easier.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We are such a performance driven society where we talk, like, we're trying to get people to understand that rest is productive. And of course, we've been talking about a movement a lot here, but like the idea that maybe we don't need to constantly be achieving some next goal, and that's okay, that we're just kind of finding a homeostasis and feeling really good and relaxed, and not finding more ways to put pressure on ourselves when so many other things are out there that are already naturally doing that, to just being in our bodies.
Yeah, I always say there's enough things to stress about. Food should not be one of them. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think another message that I share with my clients a lot is like every meal is an opportunity to try again. If your last meal didn't make you feel very good, it doesn't mean the whole day is ruined. It doesn't mean you're not good at this. It doesn't mean anything other than the awesome thing about eating is we do it pretty much every day, multiple times a day for every day of our lives. You just get to try again and recalibrate your compass at the next meal.
Yes.
And see if you can get a little bit closer to something that feels better.
Yes, that language I hear a lot too, both with mental health, with eating. I mean, I'm not a eating specialist, but like, eating comes into conversation, certainly, because again, it is a coping skill for people and utilized in different ways. And that idea of like, well, I've already had this one piece of cake at my nephew's birthday, so therefore I should go have 6 because I've already failed. So I might as well fail big. And it's like, what is life, my darling, if you can't have a piece of cake at your nephew's birthday? Again, like diabetes on the side, like, like no, and turning that off, like it's not a zero sum. Like, did you have a piece of cake? Cool. Do you need to have another piece of cake? Maybe. Do you need to have 7 because you failed? You have not failed.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no failure when it comes to eating or nourishing your body, but there is feedback. And so you can get better perhaps at tuning in and connecting with your body and learning to understand that feedback. Like what can you learn from that will be useful next time?
Yes, I love that. Like, how do we tune into the feedback? Are we recognizing sluggishness in the morning? Are we recognizing, would you say, like swollen fingers? Are we feeling, what are some other things that are like kind of everybody's body's different, certainly, but like some typical key indicators of maybe we could look for
like how are your energy levels, right? How's your digestion? How are your bowel movements?
Yes.
How do you feel at the end of a meal? Do you feel unpleasant or pleasant or neutral? Like how, I mean, there's so many great things that we can look at like that.
So I think it comes back to intention again, right? Like I think so many of us just kind of float through the day. We deal with one stressor, one fire drill after another at work or in life or in stay-at-home parenting or all of the above. And we're just kind of happy to have made it to the end of the day. But it's like, if you're actually paying attention, I've had a meal and how did I feel? And how was I hungry before? And am I hungry after? And was I satisfied with the meal? And just putting some more intentionality behind what we're doing.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And I did want to ask some out of curiosity, again, I really focus, my specialty is ADHD and being neurospicy and all of that. I was curious if there were anything that you had read or thought about in terms of fueling the body to help with like neurotoxicity or neurodivergence in general. Is there anything that's actually, I know you said already earlier that food science is definitely a long way from being refined. Is there anything that you've heard that's kind of helpful or less helpful?
Yeah, it's definitely not my area of expertise. So I probably don't have like a very specific thing. I do work with a lot of people who maybe have ADHD and take medication, and that impacts your hunger levels, your
Mhm.
appetite, and also it can make it just harder to get a meal on the table if you have ADHD, right? Or to get
Mhm.
grocery shopping or the organization pieces. And so I
Yes,
think
yes.
breaking it down into like really simple action steps, honoring, where someone's at, and then probably, um, you know, uh, helping people come up with strategies that work for them, given the reality of how their brain works
Mhm.
or how they think of things. But I don't have another like very specific thing to
Yeah.
share around that.
But I like what you were saying though, because this is so my spouse and I both have ADHD diagnosed very young, and obviously that's a hereditary thing. Sorry, kids. But like for me, when we first moved here, and then about a month into it, my spouse went on a trip to Italy for work. What privilege, for training and all of this stuff. And my parents came down, and I am this is not a them problem, whatever. But I wasn't doing the things that I do to help keep my ADHD in check as much.
Mhm.
Um, and then I really realized, like, right when they were leaving, how chaotic and twirly I was feeling, just because the
Mhm.
things that I have been intentional about setting up for myself, not in
Mhm.
a rigid way, but just I know. So one of the things though was that every Friday or so, I have a piece of paper, Sunday through Saturday. What do we want for meals? That is what I put in
Yeah.
the grocery order. Sometimes we certainly deviate because life happens, but generally speaking, then not only from my anxiety, which unmanaged ADHD also manifests as anxiety, but just anxiety in general of having to keep a house together and have
Mhm.
a job and all of these things. I'm able to put that in to that grocery order. I know what's happening. There's really nothing that is surprising to me. I know, like, I need to pull this out
Yeah.
that day or the night before to let it thaw. I need this equipment. I need this stuff. I have this stuff. I don't have this stuff. And that's definitely something for me from the eating, preparing food, parenting, neuro spicy space of all of it, is like, that is what works for me, because it takes
Yeah.
that guessing. And I like you mentioned that, and I was like, yes, that definitely for me is something that just really pushes that anxiety out a lot.
Yeah, a lot of my clients who have ADHD, it's systems, getting routines in place, and then also often a schedule, right? Sometimes people
Mhm.
forget to eat, or they have more trouble maybe than someone else connecting with hunger and fullness cues. And so having some sort of schedule in place around their eating can be really helpful. And
Mm.
then, yeah, like breaking down, is there like a road grocery order that happens on repeat, and then you can make additions or changes to it when
Mhm.
necessary? And is there meal planning in place? Things
Mhm.
like that, I think are helpful.
Yes. I mean, that is definitely something we talk about all the time. And I think with the diet piece as well. And then you mentioned too, so like I take Vyvanse. And so, I mean, in the morning I wake up and I'm hungry, and I'm a I have always had to have breakfast.
Yeah, me too.
That's not the same for everybody, but for me, it definitely fuels my body appropriately. But then I take it and I could go until, 5 o'clock until I'm hungry. And so
Yeah.
what are some suggestions that you do have for people? Because obviously that's not typically the goal, is to just not
Mhm.
eat, but it can be difficult when you've got something that helps
Yeah.
diet,
So
the
I
brain.
think definitely try to get a good meal in before, like a bigger meal in before you take your medication. Um, Even though you're not feeling hungry during the day, to know that your body actually still needs nourishment and fuel and energy. And so can you plan at least a couple of smaller snacks if it doesn't feel very good to have a bigger meal in your stomach while you're taking the medication? Can you at least plan a couple of snacks throughout the day, and then probably know that you're gonna need more food, bigger meals towards the end of the day, as the medication starts to wear off, is
Mhm.
usually what I would suggest with someone, depending on their individual
Yeah,
circumstances, of course.
of
But
course, yeah. But going back to that intention piece and setting yourself for success, but like when I am Vyvanse not hungry, I can still eat a string cheese and a cup of berries. And even though
mhm.
I'm not like ravenous for a full meal, at least I'm getting something inside.
Yeah.
I like that idea, that again, being intentional ahead of time.
Yeah, and just debunking, so much of the messaging out in the world is like, well, if you're not eating, you don't feel hungry, that's a good thing. But actually, hunger is not the enemy. It's like your body meeting a biological need. And if it's artificially suppressed, but because of a medication, just
Mhm.
know you still need food. right? And so however you can get it in really is beneficial.
Yes.
But I think just changing the mindset of it's
Yes.
not automatically better not to be eating. Your body still needs nourishment.
Yes. Yes. All we're fueling. Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thank you. So I feel like I could talk to you for a whole other hour, but I really appreciate you taking the time. This is just such good information for all of us to have. Those of us who are parents, and how we're trying to teach our children, and how we're talking to ourselves, and getting away from that perfectionism and being in harmony with our body instead of fighting against it is just, I think it's a message that we can't really hear enough. So I really appreciate you sharing your intellectual and emotional labor with us on that.
Thank you for having me. It was so fun.
It's my pleasure. So where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram or Facebook at Elizabeth Harris Nutrition. I do have a Facebook community that I manage. It's called Health and Healing with Intuitive Eating. And then I also have a free guide that I would love to offer to any of your listeners. I'm sure I can get you the link. You can put it in the show notes, but it's called Invisible Diet. And if you're wondering if you're unintentionally or maybe even intentionally following a lot of diet culture rules about how you eat that maybe are not serving you, that's a great thing to look at and just see. It'll tell you a lot about your relationship with food. So I'd love to share that with anyone.
That will be in the show notes. And I love that because it goes back to what you're saying, like you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Yeah, and so much of it is so normalized that we don't even realize, hey, maybe you don't have to do that thing, or maybe that thing is having this impact on you and you'd never thought about it that way.
Absolutely. And it is invisible. It's those messages. So I really appreciate that. That will be in the show notes. Everybody go check out Elizabeth and get to know more about her work. And as always, be curious, not judgmental, and make it a good one. We'll see you back next time.